and you kind of experience the gravity and the presence of that animal through taxidermy and through something sculptural, and even contemplating mortality, the fact that there was a death there. I think that those are all such important conversations that we need to have, especially as our ecology is so delicate.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Community Foundation in support of the Adirondack Community Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities. How are we on your level here?
I don't know. How are we on my level here?
Pretty quiet. Could you point it towards your face?
Well, I don't know that's towards my forehead.
Well, no, you can move it, but it was falling down because it was loose.
How's this?
I don't know.
Do I want to just take this off? Is that better now?
I mean, a little. Just talk normally.
Oh, wow, man.
Mitch, do all dogs go to heaven, or do some go to dog hell?
My dogs will definitely be going someday to dog heaven. They will cause a ruckus there, but can you imagine what dog heaven might be like, actually?
I bet it is very slobbery up there. Just like every surface is just covered in dog slobber. I don't think I would like it. If that's what I have to contend with in heaven, send me somewhere else.
Well, it's dog heaven.
You think it's different than human heaven?
I think it is different than human heaven because, if dogs thought of their concept of heaven, they would be crapping everywhere,
sniffing every butt.
And
and
I don't know that that's necessarily compatible with human heaven.
Maybe it's the same plane. There's just like a door that you have to open to get to dog
exactly.
heaven. Yeah. You can invite the dogs.
It's a doggy door.
Right.
The swinging pearly gates.
Yeah, my version of heaven has no dogs because
pearly doggy door. That's what I was
pearly
going
doggy
for.
door. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's not bad. My version of heaven does not have dogs in it because I think heaven is supposed to be this idealized place, and dogs do not respect your personal space. And I would like to think that in heaven there would be an attention to detail that would allow me my own personal.
There will be attention to detail.
Well, it's not just
there
lawless.
There are no typos in heaven.
Anyway, there are no typos in heaven would be a good.
Be a good memoir. Wouldn't
It would be yes. I was going to say it'd be a good title for a series of a collection of essays. There are no typos in heaven.
Or a memoir of a proofreader.
Yeah, all the famous proofreaders out there whose audience really wants their memoir.
We're going to have to pivot very gently from talking about doggy heaven to our topic today on Northwards. This is Ethan Shanty, by the way, and he killed Laura Palmer.
It did not even occur to me that what I was asking you might rub up against the subject of today's interview.
Rub up against the subject in much the way that dogs in heaven get to rub up against whatever they want.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, yeah. Transition.
We're talking about, typography?
Aren't we talking about taxidermy?
Oh, taxidermy, that's right. Sorry, I was still on the proofreading bit. We're talking about taxidermy. We are revisiting an interview I did a little over a year ago with a taxidermist who was at that point about to come up from New York and do a couple of taxidermy workshops with folks at the Adirondack Experience. But it was a really interesting conversation. And Ethan, I don't know, do you have any taxidermy experiences in your life? There were hunters in your family.
There are hunters in our family, but we don't like taxidermy the kill. My dad would cut off the horns of the deer that he killed and have them mounted. So
does that count as taxidermy? I don't know.
No,
you're not really stuffing the horns.
No, there's like a similar through line, I think, in that you're preserving a part of it to display. But yeah, taxidermy has always kind of freaked me out. But hearing this interview and her novel and gentle approach to it was enlightening.
Yeah, we got into I don't know, a philosophical discussion about like doing right by the memory and the lives of these animals.
Right.
And it was one of those topics where you don't know how many questions you have about it until you start thinking, wow, taxidermy. And then you sit down with a taxidermist and you find you have like 10,000 questions.
What was the most interesting thing that you learned from your conversation with her?
I actually, so it's going to be funny because the answer turned out to be not nearly as interesting. You can judge for yourself.
I will.
But I was really curious what her studio feels like when she's preserving these animals. And I guess I was under the impression, you've got these, for lack of a better word, carcasses that you're cutting open. And I wondered what it smelled like.
Right, yeah.
In her studio. And and I was surprised that it smelled like the candles that that she lights. And they weren't completely overtaken by the smell. I guess, once by the time she gets the animals, they've been preserved in some way that that they don't make her taxidermy studio smell like dead animal.
Right.
But,
yeah. And I hope that no taxidermists who are listening will take offense to this, but like the image that she presents of her workshop is directly at odds with the mental image I have of a taxidermist shop, which is something akin to like Leatherface's basement dungeon from the
No, I don't think any taxidermist would be insulted by that at all.
And obviously that's not true.
I'm sure
but
they embrace that image.
Well, I have such little experience with the practice that, my head just goes to this like really gruesome place because, you are taking apart animals and preserving them. And obviously I know that that's not true, but it's the first image that comes into my head, which I was dispelled of that notion through this interview with her.
She was definitely what you would call a Renaissance taxidermist. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't call her that, but
Sure,
I would.
I'll allow you that.
It was an interesting conversation, and I hope you'll find it interesting as well. It's with a woman named Divya Anantharaman, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So where do you think taxidermy falls in the continuum where maybe art is on one end and science is on the other?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it falls right in the middle. It contains, to me, it contains the best of both worlds. It contains the best of art and the best of science, which is amazing because both of those worlds have so many wonderful aspects to them.
Was it one side or the other, the art or the science, that first attracted you to the field? I mean, how did you happen to come to it?
What attracted me to the field was that taxidermy really does contain, so much equal parts of art and science. I think the fact that it didn't really fit fully, it didn't fit fully into one or the other, that it contained multitudes. I think that's what attracted me to it. And that is what keeps me interested in it today.
Were you a science-y kid or someone that just was into animals? Or, I think being interested in it is one thing, but kind of pursuing it as either a hobby or a profession as you do is something a little more than that.
Absolutely. So what attracted me to taxidermy first was truly, it was a love of animals. A lot of taxidermists grow up in, the woods or access to a lot of, they're around nature. They are surrounded by nature, whether it's, forests, mountains, and these places we think of as these holy, sacred, natural spaces. I grew up in Miami, and I currently live and have been living for the past 22 years in New York City. So I've always been in an urban environment, but I was an animal lover, especially a lover of birds, because birds do frequent all of these urban environments. And the way I made a lot of my first and most memorable connections to animals was going to natural history museums and seeing taxidermy. And although they weren't as lively as the animals that are outside that you can observe with live observation, what the taxidermy did was it gave me that time with animals. You can sit by a diorama until the museum closes. You can have all the time you want with that animal. which you don't get with wild observation. And you're not guaranteed wild observation either. So it was really just a love and fascination of animals that brought me to it. And, seeing what that stillness illuminates that kept me and still keeps me going with it.
Well, and this was not your original career plan, right?
No, in fact, I worked in the fashion industry for a little over 10 years. And I've, again, always had this love of, I always loved animals and I was always doing animal related hobbies, whether they were volunteer efforts or doing cat rescue, like I'm a cat rescuer as well, and just doing these animal related things. And of course, I had taxidermy going as a hobby. It was something that I did, through reading books and watching videos and stuff like that. But while I was working in the fashion industry, I worked in accessories and shoes, which involve a lot of work with leather. And the more I worked with leather, I saw how much of the animal is sort of, it's treated like a product as opposed to a whole being. And that's what bothered me, because what's nice about leather, why people love leather, is that it's the skin of an animal. It's got grain, it's got character. And yet we throw away so many of the undesirable parts, or we kind of say like, it's just not like treated with reverence. And, how could it be? You're working for a company looking to make a profit. Of course, it's not, reverence and profit don't go hand in hand in our world. So that really kind of like got me thinking about doing taxidermy and pursuing it more and more. So while I was working in fashion, I pursued it as a hobby, put my work out there on social media. I took classes and did as much learning as I could. And slowly I kind of transitioned away from the fashion world and transitioned into the world of taxidermy.
Do you remember the first animal you ever worked on doing a taxidermy project?
Yes, I do. It was a small gray squirrel that I'd found. I was hiking and it was very snowy outside. So I was like, oh my gosh, this squirrel is literally frozen. So yeah, it was this gray squirrel and it was so horrible. It turned out so horribly that I was just hooked on the process. And I really do wish I'd kept it, because I gave it to a friend, but I really wish I'd kept it, because I'd love to look back on it and to see if it was really as horrible as I remembered it being. I think that, I think being a beginner, you kind of, you expect something, but then you kind of are, I think beginners are much harder on themselves than someone who's done something for a long time. So yeah, I wish I'd kept it.
Did it feel like a big step for you to come across this frozen squirrel and like actually pick it up and take it home with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was it's really important to remember every taxidermy project starts with an animal, and that animal had a life, and that there's so much reverence to that life that is contained there. I think that is like, that's something that never leaves. And that just that through the years, like I've been doing taxidermy professionally for about 10 years. And so through the years, there are lots of things and lots of professions you get desensitized to. There's like almost an increased or like a hypersensitivity to that reverence for life that's there. So I feel like the first time, what has changed is the first time that I saw that squirrel, the first time that I came across that little body, I didn't have the words for what I felt. Now I have a few more words, but I don't think I'll ever fully have all the words for those emotions, and just that feeling of like, wow, life is so precious. Life is kind of miraculous. This little tiny body contains, a tiny heart, a tiny brain, little lungs. Like, it contained all these things that created life and processed life and held life. And now I'm trying to take this thing apart and put it back together so other people can feel this sense of wonder and kind of make their own connection to this animal. Yeah.
You mentioned natural history museums, and that's I'm sure where most of us first encountered taxidermy, and for a long time, that was the main way these museums did exhibits, and I know that's changed in some ways, but it does still seem to be a big part of the equation.
I think so. I think that natural history museums, there is so much importance in the connection to animals that people have, especially for an urban environment, especially as, cities get bigger and bigger, which is, these are the epicenters where people are living, but it still doesn't mean that we can stop thinking about nature. We still live on this planet. I can live fully in the middle of the concrete jungle, but I'm still a part of we're all still a part of nature. And I think that natural history museums with taxidermy, especially, they play this really important role in connecting us to nature and showing us that, although we're separated by glass, this bird can fly and I can't. I have to buy a ticket and wait in line and go through security if I want to fly, I can't just get up and flap away. But there's a beauty in that, right? There's beauty in like, oh, what are our differences? What are our similarities? How are we connected? And you kind of experience the gravity and the presence of that animal through taxidermy and through something sculptural in a way that you can't experience through a digital or a two-dimensional. Being around that presence and, and even contemplating mortality, the fact that there was a death there, I think that those are all such important, those are such important conversations that we need to have, especially as our ecology is so delicate and so threatened.
So we're talking a couple of days before you do some workshops at the Adirondack Experience, and I know you do other workshops around the country. In fact, do you have a sense for well, I guess maybe this is two questions. Why others want to try their hand in your field, and why the educational part of what you do is such an important aspect of your work?
Oh my gosh, we could have a whole hour where I talk about this specific topic. Yeah, I think that, so yes, I'm teaching classes at the Adirondack Experience this weekend. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to teach there. It's a beautiful place, and they're so passionate about, the ecology of their location, all the nature there, and they do such a beautiful job of, of showing you what that area is and why it's so important. With the classes in general, I think what I love about teaching is sharing this craft, this art, this science, putting it in other people's hands and seeing what they do with it. For a long time, taxidermy and the related practices of, specimen preparation and just the work around death and aftercare of animals was very guarded and very gate kept. And that was a huge challenge for me when I was trying to learn it. There weren't a lot of classes that were accessible to me either by location because, I'm in the city, didn't have a car, so couldn't drive anywhere, couldn't drive, and also didn't want to invest like a whole week or 2 weeks or a month in something that at that time I didn't know if it would be a career or just a hobby. So it's, investments of time, investments of money, investments of location and movement, like those are barriers that people face. So I think when you kind of remove those barriers and start to make the classes a little more accessible, that's something that's very exciting and very interesting. I think the other thing I'm seeing, and it kind of goes back to your previous question about change, I think the other thing I'm seeing with the classes is that there's so much diversity in who comes to take the classes. It's people who have been historically excluded from this field and people from all different backgrounds. Some people take this class and they're not trying to become a taxidermist. They just want to try something with their hands. They want to connect to animals and nature. There's that aspect. And there's also the aspect that this gets you away from a screen. It's the most real life experience you can have, really. You're confronting life, you're confronting death, you're confronting this being, and it's like you and this animal, and you're in a place with it. And you have to learn like a bunch of different skills like sewing, sculpting, looking at anatomy, kind of seeing a bit of engineering and how something works and how to put it back together. So I think that it's a combination of all of those things of removing the barriers, making it accessible, and giving people an experience that is less and less common in our daily lives. I think that's what brings people to it. And on top of that, is having an outlet for creativity and curiosity.
Not to overstate the differences between people in New York or Los Angeles or Philadelphia and people in the North Country where wildlife is so much closer. Do you feel differences when you're working in a place like the Adirondack Experience versus, going to some place like Philadelphia or LA?
Absolutely. There's such a difference. And I think the best thing about teaching is that as I'm teaching taxidermy, I'm teaching the skill, but I get to learn. Like, this is a beautiful thing that I tell all of my students. I'm teaching, but I'm also learning from all of my students. I'm learning about their experiences and their perspectives. And I think all of that just enriches, it just enriches the field. Students in the big cities are going to have one experience and background with wildlife. Students in places where you are completely immersed in nature have another experience with wildlife. And there's so much beauty and learning in all of that.
So, on the occasions when you're not traveling and doing workshops, what is a day in the life of a professional taxidermist like?
The day in the life of a professional taxidermist would be really similar to, a day in the life of probably any small business owner or artist practitioner of any type. So I'm usually working in my studio. I do classes at my studio as well in New York City. That's usually on the weekends, but the weekdays I'm, working in my studio, working on commission projects, working on projects for, projects for different clients. There's also, of course, like administrative work, the not so fun stuff like emails and bookkeeping and all of that. But yeah, it's really like a day of doing all different types of work.
For somebody who's never gone through the process, how long does a typical commission piece take from, I guess, beginning to end?
That's a great question. So it really depends on, like, the length of a project really depends on the difficulty of the project, how complex it is. So it's not necessarily size that is the factor as opposed to complexity, because something very small, like, if I'm working on a hummingbird or something, that can actually take me a lot longer to work on than a crow because the details are much smaller and much finer. So I would say a project can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months or even a few years if it's a really large project. And to be sustainable as a business, you've also got to work on multiple projects at a time. So when you add that to it, you're looking at something that is not fast, but is very rewarding.
So you might be working on a crow in the morning and realize that you also have these 3 or 4 other commissions that are in progress, and you have to get something done on each of them.
Yeah, I'm usually working on multiple. Usually a day is working on multiple projects, spending time with multiple projects. Yeah, for sure.
Is there a typical client or typical type of client that you work for? I mean, who's coming to you to have these projects done?
That's a great question. So my typical clients are, they kind of range all around. So I work with museums and conservation groups and, people who are looking for specimens for either just straightforward scientific display and just straightforward display, or I also work with conservation groups on doing study skins and things like that. So those are some of my typical clients. On the other side, I also have clients who are usually first time taxidermy buyers, which I think is really cool because there are people who are like, I never thought I wanted taxidermy in my home until I saw work like this, which is probably the hugest like compliment you can get because I'm like, oh wow, like, you think taxidermy is just like a head on a wall, but no, it's like a full and vast and expansive art form. So there are people who are more art collectors that are some of my clients, which is like really, really fun. And there are also clients who are looking for companion animal preservation. So I know people who, raise birds or have companions that they want to keep a memento of. Sometimes that's taxidermy. Oftentimes it's more of a memento or like a partial preservation, like doing something with a skull or some sort of more like memento mori type of piece as opposed to a straightforward taxidermy.
I imagine you are not the one doing, the head of the deer or the moose or whatever, though, for someone's trophy wall.
Not quite. My passion is birds, so birds are what I do. Although if someone is looking for that, there are plenty of people I can refer them to, and plenty of people who specialize in that, which is great.
Give us a sense for what's in your studio. What are the kinds of tools that you need to do the things that you do?
There are so many different types of tools. I would say that there are a lot of tools from hardware store, a lot of tools from the art supply store, lots of tools from the sewing store, and then a lot of the work I do is very fine. So I also have a lot of tools from beauty supply shops, like various different weird little tweezers, various little snippers. Of course, lots of knives, lots of scalpels, small scalpel blades. I love, like, I kind of collect a bit of everything. Yeah, there's a bit of everything tool wise. If there's a store that sells tools, I'll probably go in there and buy something.
Well, and is it improvised? Have you figured out like what you need over the years? I imagine there's probably not like a definitive book that says you must have, this brand of tweezers and this brand of pliers or anything. This seems like something that as the artist you would figure out on your own.
Yeah, I mean, there are for certain things for like the commercial taxidermy practice, like for someone, the folks I know who are like, all I do are deer heads and turkeys and ducks. I have these tools. These are my prescribed set of tools. I think for me, because the things I work on are so varied and so, they're not really like the typical commercial taxidermy specimens because because things are specialized. And sometimes I'll get a client, like right now I'm working on something for a client. There are these replica flamingos I'm working on, but they're supposed to look like they're coming out of clouds. So I'm like, how do I make a cloud? So it's sort of like, I don't even know it. So I got like a doll. I got some needle felting tools for that. I got some like doll making needles for that. So this is sort of like kind of do figure it out as you go. But then, I'm not a single use person. I'm like, if I buy this tool, I need to figure out how to use it for something else. Which is pretty fun. And I think most artistic practices, whether they're doing commercial work or custom work or something in between, I think most artists really have a special relationship with their tools, like, and figuring out their, expansive uses for them.
Well, and forgive me if this is a strange question, but what does your studio smell like?
It smells like a Santa Maria, this like candle I got from the store in New York called Santa Maria Novella. It's like my favorite store. That's like these scents that have been made in a monastery in Florence since like since before time, I guess. So it smells old, but not in a bad way. It smells like an old, like something from the 12th century, I guess.
But it does not smell like chemicals and preservatives and stuff from the specimens themselves.
No. Oh, that's a huge misconception that people have about taxidermy smelling bad. Like it shouldn't. I mean, I would say the skinning process, yes, you're going to have smells with that. But it's probably the same smells that you smell at dinner time when you're cooking chicken. If you cook meat, like it probably smells worse actually when you're cooking meat, because with taxidermy, we're not kind of keep everything really, really clean. But yeah, the studio, like I think there was one time where like certain animals, like, if they've been really sick or if they've been really deteriorated, that's when you'll experience smells, but then they're not usually suitable. If something's very deteriorated and rotting, it's not suitable for taxidermy, so it wouldn't come in here. So yeah.
Well, and maybe this is another strange question, but do you have an interesting relationship with your FedEx or your UPS guy who has to be bringing you remains of animals every day?
Well, not really. I mean, usually, to be like respectful to them and to myself and have my, to my clients, like usually everything should be packaged up really well. So anyone who's shipping these specimens, they get like a 3-page guide on how to ship. It's really not super complicated, just making sure it's frozen, putting it in a cooler, taping it up. But yeah, I think it's for the better that people don't know what's coming, because everyone has their own attitudes towards death, and I wouldn't want to be, disrespectful to anyone's, beliefs around that. But yeah, that's why I do always tell people when they're shipping to me, though, I'm like, you need to understand that outside is not a freezer. So you need to realize like it's very important to follow packing instructions and shipping directions very closely. And, there are some people who'll send me specimens. They're like, are you sure you want to pay for overnight? It's so expensive. I'm like, what's expensive is getting a bloody box, because then I'm on a blacklist. So no, we're gonna splurge on this, for the sanctity of the specimen, for just everyone involved. Yeah, you kind of have to go a little overboard with shipping, but yeah.
Do you listen to music when you're doing this, or do you have to have, absolute silence to be able to concentrate?
I would say it's a bit of both. Sometimes I listen to music. Most of the times I'm listening to podcasts or audiobooks.
I guess that maybe just this one kind of question to bring it all home. Do you feel like who do you feel like you're honoring when you take a client's project on?
That's a great question. When I take a client's project on, I'm honoring the client really because I'm wanting to give them I'm trying to give them what they're expecting and trying to give them what they're looking for. There's also, you're also honoring the animal. Like there's no denying that. I think that it's so dependent, like if I'm working with a companion animal, I'm honoring that animal, the client, and their relationship. That's really what you're honoring. If I'm working on something more straightforward, like something for a scientific organization, you're honoring that organization, the animal, and the audience, the public who's going to see that animal, right? You're sort of coming up with, you're like, okay, we need to do it in this pose. Well, this pose, why? What story is this pose telling? What, what's the message it's sending to other people? So you're really honoring, the people involved and their relationship to the animal, so that animal itself, and honoring the animal in turn to do that. So it's sort of like not just one specific entity, but it's like the animals, the people, and their connection to each other.
Well, it's really fascinating work that you do, and you talk about it so eloquently, Divya. I'm so grateful to have gotten to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much. This was so great. I'm really glad.
Divya Anantharaman is a taxidermist. We spoke with her last year ahead of a couple of workshops at the Adirondack Experience. Ethan Shanty is back in the studio with us. Ethan, it dawns on me the closest thing in my life to taxidermy is the fish phone that I've had since I was 17 years old. It's not a real fish. It is a real phone, though.
How do I respond to that?
What do
I say?
This was the mid-'80s.
It's gigantic.
It's not gigantic.
What? I thought the photo I saw was like huge.
Well, it's bigger than a cell phone.
Didn't it like take up the entire side of your head?
No, it was like a phone. Like
I don't know.
Did you grow up with a phone on the wall in your house?
Yeah, of course I did.
Like it had to like one piece had to be over your ear and the other piece had to reach your mouth.
I'm just saying, like the photo I saw, it looked like the fish was huge.
It's not even. It's the size of a small fish. A rainbow trout. You might throw it back if you caught it. So this was a fish phone that I bought at a boutique in Georgetown, in D.C. for probably $45, which was a lot of money for a phone in like 1985 or 86.
Well, it's a novelty. You're going to pay extra.
Right. And it was a high quality phone. I once filed a report. When I was living in Minnesota at this point, and still using. I mean, this is still before cell phones were common, and so I was filing a report on God knows what from my apartment in Rochester, Minnesota, for the BBC, and the BBC audio engineer on the other end said, "Wow, that's a really good phone you have," and I said, "It's shaped like a rainbow trout." And after he stopped laughing, he said, maybe we should all get phones shaped like rainbow trouts.
And you still have it?
I still have it somehow. Well, so all due props to my oldest friend, William, who he and his wife, Monica, came to Wisconsin to help my wife pack up the house and like discard a lot of things when we were moving out here, and I was already living here, and there was a ton of stuff to go through. As Gretchen, my wife, describes it, she and Monica were ready to give the fish phone the heave-ho, and William intervened and said, "No, you will not throw out that fish phone."
That's a good friend.
And there was a box in our garage that was marked with miscellaneous, including fish phone. So when it came time to take a picture for my Northwards column, which you should really subscribe to at ncpr.org/Northwards, when it came time to take a picture for a column in which I mentioned the fish phone, I knew exactly where to find it in my garage.
And that's the kind of attention to detail that heaven will have.
Exactly. That, and it will have a series of closing credits.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by... What are you doing?
Fish noises.
The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. Doyle Dean is our production manager. Bill Hanel is our director of digital services. And stop it. Caitlin Kelly handles everything on social media. To find out more about the show and hear other conversations, visit ncpr.org/Northwards. You had to back away from the mic to stop yourself.
She blows.